The most unique part of my creative process for me, from my perspective, is the organizing and the timing. I often think about making art or writing a book as being a chef, and you know, I the best part of cooking for me is that everything comes out at the right time, at the right temperature, so that you can plate the food and have it all ready to serve. You don't want one dish that's been sitting around for 20 minutes and getting cold while another cooks. And in order to do that, you've got to understand the timing that each part takes, the preparation that it takes, and rewind. And so there's a real methodical nature to it. And yet it's unlike cooking, to write or to create artwork for me is to allow room for experimentation, allow room for discovery, and to allow room for mistakes, because mistakes are, I think, the most illuminating part of a process. And especially when it comes to writing, there is confusion, or there's time where you have to step away, and so that sort of, you could call that letting it cook time. You put it in the oven, you can't do anything, you got to walk away, and then there are other things to do. For example, and that extends to not just the creative process, but to how I set up my studio. And I'm going to be carrying my laptop around a little bit. One of the things that I love to do is put things on trays. And actually, this metaphor for and so it's the brushes are for inks are in one tray, the brushes for colored inks are in another tray, different water dishes, different ink trays, and on all of my tables are levels of areas with different trays and different tools, and that's throughout the entire studio. And I used to think that I was sort of overly anal, because oftentimes the cliche of the art studio is this messy sort of Francis Bacon type of half trash compactor looking, and the other half art creation. But I heard a chef speak, this was years ago, and she was talking about how she organizes her kitchen with the tools that she uses the most closest to her, and that there was sort of radiated out in all dimensions, up and down and left and right. The less you use the tool, the further away it was. And I love this idea because you could change your kitchen based on what you were cooking. I can change the studio based on what I'm working on. Everything is on wheels. I've built all my own tables, or had them designed and constructed. And that's because I can then make that space really functional to execute whatever creativity that I'm doing at the moment. At any given time, I'm reading at least 3 books. I'm actively engaged in reading 3 books. And there's probably at least 3 more that are in that sort of side wing. And those might be the, I hope to finish. I started reading them, I might not finish them, but there's always 3 going. And what I like is at any given moment, I can say, well, which of those do I feel like engaging in or progressing? But whichever one I'm most into is the one that I carry in my bag with me everywhere. And I love having a book on me at any given time. The third collection of All Over Coffee, my newest book, is called You Know Exactly, and it's short for the phrase that's on this piece: you know exactly what you have to do. And this was from my series All Over Coffee, which ran in the San Francisco Chronicle for 12 years, from 2004 to 2015. And about a third of the way through the series, maybe eight years or so, I realized that I was doing this thing in my studio where I was writing notes to myself and putting them on Post-its and placing them all around my drawing table and my workspace. And these were very private notes. They were just sort of short, succinct lines that were about the process or kind of inspirational. I mean, I joked that they were like my personal version of the kitten hanging from a tree that said, hang in there. But they were just me scribbling on a Post-it note. And one day I was having an open studio, and a friend of mine was there, and this was a public event. There was maybe 30 or 40 people milling about, and he came over and he said, he recited one of the lines from the Post-it notes, and he said, "Wow, that's the most important thing I've seen in the studio today." And interestingly, I learned later that he was having a very personal crisis, and so this one line had jumped out to him, not the one on the book, but another one. But what the Post-it showed me was that here I was writing this work for a large audience, and yet I was writing these personal notes to myself, and I thought, if these are important to me to look at every day, maybe they're important to other people to look at as well. And so I began this whole series that I called Writing on the Wall, which is where I was doing these these cityscapes, but sort of more intimate, where there was a side of a wall visible, and I was infusing the text as if it were painted on the side of the building. And you know exactly what you have to do was one of the lines I had written to myself. And that line was about transitioning. I was beginning to work on becoming a novelist, and it was basically adding a new profession into a profession I already had. And the shift was a big change because I had a career that was working, and while it was still drawing and writing, it was still very much within my creative profession. It was a different direction, and to do that meant that I was going to have to kind of start over to some degree and face some new challenges. But the line told me, it was my reminder to say, well, this is where you need to go. So follow yourself in that way. And so I made this piece off the Post-it note. And it's incredible the response that it got, because I think that it speaks to people in the same way that it spoke to me, which is it's not dictating what it is that anyone has to do. It's reminding us that there's something inside of us that we know that we want to do, and for whatever reason we're trepidatious. There's fear, of change, there's fear of failure, there's just all these things that prevent us from actually doing the things we want. And I've received so many emails, and I mean, for years I've gotten responses that every time people see this, how much that it sort of engages them and inspires them to follow the thing that they already know that they want. The best piece of advice I have ever received is to own everything, to own the rights to my work, to own the control of how the work is used. And it's for both monetary and for in terms of one's image and one's creative direction. And interestingly, I learned this in around 8th grade. I had a very good art teacher in high school and middle school, and he would bring in speakers, and he would bring in professionals from the community. And there was actually a guy who was pretty angry. I think he had gotten screwed over by some deal that he had signed away. And so his whole talk, or at least what I remember, what my takeaway was, he was very angry, and he said, don't ever sign your rights away. And I think that was really instilled in me, this idea that to be a creative person isn't just to make art or to write books, but it is also to create your future, to create your business. And it was that it's okay to be a business person, and that it's okay to think about how to take care of yourself practically in terms of how your work is used in the world. And then there's a second part, which I got from my parents, because they were entrepreneurs. They started their own businesses, which is more of a lesson than advice, which is to not wait for permission. And I think those two are tied together, because if you want to make something, if you have a vision, in order to share that vision, you have to realize it, and to not assume that other people can see what you can see. And your job as a creative person is to make that visible for the public, and in order to communicate your ideas, or to share, or whatever your goals are. But so to own not just your rights or your direction, but to own your own vision and your choices to bring something new into the world. I think one thing that people don't know about me is that I grew up in a restaurant. My parents were very young when they had me, and they started their first restaurant when they were like 22 and 23 years old. And they took me with them everywhere. And I grew up in this environment where that you didn't wait for permission, you didn't wait for somebody else to tell you what to do. And I think that in some ways they taught me how to be an artist uh, by their demonstration. And I think it's interesting that I use cooking and a chef as a analogy for how I organize my studio, because I grew up in a restaurant, and I don't know that they organize their spaces this way, but this idea that that their practice was more creative than any other type of lessons I could have received, because we got up every day, we went to work, they had ideas, they put them into action. Some ideas worked, some ideas didn't. And then when they had failures, they retooled. They closed businesses, they opened new businesses, they tried different things. And that to me is the creative life. Also, being in the food industry, we didn't eat at the same times as other people. And so there was this sense of creating our own rhythms and our own structures. And that to me is as valuable, if not more valuable, than a lot of what I learned in art school, because, you can learn technique, you can learn how to, even, take your inspiration from internal to external, but no one ever taught me, other than my parents and growing up in this environment, how to get up on a Monday morning and say, well, this is what the rest of the world is doing, but this is what I'm doing today. And I'm going to go to my studio and I'm going to make something. And, it's creative people, or like, I think the romance of creativity is, oh, inspiration strikes, but really, what do you do on Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? That if you can be motivated to make art or to do what you want on these sort of off times, or even like Saturday night at midnight, are you going to do what the prescribed sort of what's expected to be doing at Saturday midnight, or are you going to do what you want? And that, growing up in a restaurant, taught me that. Uh, I start my day by waking up as slowly as I can. I despise alarms. I think alarms waking us up might be the cruelest invention for the modern age. I really love just letting myself come awake to stir as I'm waking, and because of that, there's this very smooth transition from the unconscious to the conscious. And I think that liminal space is that sort of dream space, is where our minds are most creative. And if I can stay in, the longer I can stay in that space, the more calm I am throughout the day and the better focused I am. And so I really like that moment where I'm aware that I'm awake, but I'm really not awake yet. And it's sort of a daydreaming. And then the moment I become aware, I try to bring to mind the things that I'm working on, be it a story or a creative project, and I let myself daydream. And then the second thing I do is I do a puzzle, either like a word puzzle or a game, something that really gets my mind focused and active and problem solving. And then I just start drinking copious amounts of coffee. It's funny. It depends. If I'm going to choose paperback, hardcover, ebook, or audiobook, it's really relative to what I'm doing. On When I'm in the studio, I listen to audiobooks. When I'm traveling, I read ebooks because I can read a lot of them. When I'm at home, the books on my bedside are all hardbacks. The books that I carry in my bag with me everywhere are paperbacks. So it's really contextual. I might own the same book in 3 different formats for that reason, and switch back and forth depending on where I am. My favorite pen is the 4-color multi pen. It's a little fat. It's not great for drawing, but I love having 4 colors at any given time. I literally probably have 12 of these pens just around the studio. I just put one at every station. I carry one in my bag. I have them all over my house. And so that at any given point, I can just pick up this pen and write in multicolors. Like always with red is either it's done or it's, crossed out or something. And so I'll have sort of a color coding in my notebooks, and or projects, a project, I'll be like, oh, that one's in green, that one's in blue. So whenever I'm making a note, around the studio or just somewhere else. Like I like being able to cross something off a list and still be able to read the word. So if it's written in black and you cross it off in red, then you can still read it. Like I save grocery lists because the next time I go to the store, I just grab the old list. I am a bookmark person, not a dog ear person. I will sometimes write in a book, but never on the text pages. I'll write maybe I like to do word counts and kind of know how many words a book is, and I'll write that in the back or the front of a book. But I love bookmarks because they're like little art objects, and I'll cut up old drawings and use them as bookmarks, or finding things out in the world, receipts, ticket stubs. And I love leaving those in books that I've finished, because it's sort of a reminder. I can, if I ever pull that book off the shelf again, I'll be like, oh, and there was a ticket from a play. That's the time I during the era I read that book, and it reminds me of the play. And so, yeah, bookmarks for sure. My reader type is a serial, sort of detective, and then also sort of bookwormish. I read a handful of different subjects. Right now, the books I'm really into, there's a book called Out There by Kate Folk that just came out. Short stories, a little bit of sci-fi, also kind of realism, great mix, really personal, beautiful voice, wonderful sentences. Dirtbag, Massachusetts by Isaac Fitzgerald. This is a memoir. This book just came out a week ago. I know Isaac from years ago in San Francisco. Good guy, beautiful book. Again, very well written. I think I like good writing. I like good storytelling. But I am also a detective genre procedural geek. This is an Italian author. His series is Montalbano books. There's, I think, 30 of these books. I'm plowing my way through this series. John Le Carré, spy, famous father of sort of modern spy telling. And then one of my favorites, another one of my favorites, Haruki Murakami. This is a book of his short stories, sort of a lesser known one that I'll just sort of keep around and pick up every now and again. I think that's a nice breadth of the things I love to read. If I were to describe the third collection of All Over Coffee, you know exactly what you have to do. I would say that it's a completion. It's a graduation. It's the third collection that wraps up 12 years of creative experimentation. So if there's anything else I want readers to know about this last and final collection of All Over Coffee, is that it fits perfectly on the shelf next to the other two books. It's very unique in that it's a top-bound book. There is a fold-out, a 4-page gatefold pull-out that is sort of a mini poster, and full color, really beautiful fold-out. We did excellent production on this book, and there are essays. It's art, it's short stories. You can pick it up anywhere. You can read 1 page at a time. You can read 30 pages at a time. I think it's a great gift book, and it's a great personal book. So it's for everyone.